There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Sean Blackburn with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by John Ellett. He is the CEO of Springbox. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Sean.
Fantastic. Absolutely. I'm excited about our topic today. We're talking about how to bust organization silos and improve demand generation. But before we begin, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you guys over at Springbox are up to these days.
Well, thanks. I am a kind of a longtime marketer. I started my career with IBM, was an advertising manager on the original IBM PC, and then got recruited out here to Austin to start the marketing functions for what became Dell. And then in today's language was the North American CMO for the high growth period in the early 90s. I had started another integrated agency that we merged together with Springbox last year, and my role now is the CEO of the combined agencies. And our focus is to help our clients become the digital leaders in their category. And we do that by helping build digital experiences that are compelling and convert, and demand generation programs that move the needle and accelerate the sales process.
I love it. And so, we're talking today about organization silos. How is it that organization silos connect with poor performance and demand generation?
Well, I think it starts from the assumption that what marketing and sales are trying to accomplish is to help customers make a buying decision. Right? So if you start the process thinking about customers and how they interact with the company, the couple dynamics that I think are important for B2B relative to consumer marketing are there are typically multiple people in the decision process, and the process extends over a period of time with very different specific steps throughout that buying process. Right. And so as companies interact with potential buyers or with current customers, it's important to have a coherent conversation across all of those touch points throughout that journey in a way that makes sense to the unique needs of each of the members of the committee and where they're at in that buying process. What has historically happened in companies, and this happens in the demand generation functions as well as anybody else, is the quest for acumen and accountability tend to override the need for agility and alignment. And by that, what I mean is organizations are set up for somebody that is the email marketing specialist or the digital advertising specialist or the search marketing specialist or the event manager or the sales enablement tools developer. That have specific skills, and then they're accountable for their specific results. And you take that at the micro level in marketing, and then certainly take it up a level where sales has its particular point of view, marketing has its point of view. Oftentimes those aren't completely aligned. And so that the quest for accountability tends to drive that focus on what I do versus looking at it systematically across the organization in a way that makes more sense to the customer.
almost a what we do question instead of what I do. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
This is maybe a little bit existential, but why is it that you think silos exist in the first place?
Yeah, the part of it is human nature. I've been asked to do a good job, and my job is defined by what I do. Therefore, I want to optimize the performance of my KPIs or what the objectives that I've been given. And
Right.
so there's organizational bias and reinforcement to say, focus on your job. Not necessarily a bad thing to do. People want to know what they're accountable for and to do a good job at that. And that takes leadership to create a different model that figures out ways to get the best of individual accountability, but taking up to a higher level of alignment. And that frequently needs to have a variety of factors. One, a common understanding of the customer and what they need and how to engage with the customer across the whole engagement system. It takes common objectives. How do we make sure we're all trying to accomplish the same thing? And if that same thing is a number of net new customers, net new logos, amount of revenue, that there is an overriding benefit to the organization to accomplish those collective goals versus what I see in a lot of organizations where marketing has a lot of goals around their contribution to pipeline. Awesome.
Right.
However, that then creates sometimes a contention around, did marketing make that contribution? Was that sales contribution? Who actually did that? As opposed to a system that looks at sales and marketing working collaboratively to move the needle together. And that's where I think coming back to some common objectives that everybody is focused on helps bring a good mechanism for breaking down the silos.
So, you guys work with a lot of clients to, help them obviously with a lot of their objectives, like you said, to help them become the digital leaders in their space. What's some examples of you see that you have helped companies do this at an organizational level?
Well, I think as the B2B marketers have increasingly shifted to account-based marketing, there are some inherent benefits of that approach that work really nice from this alignment perspective. And what we've done is help create a framework for account-based marketing planning that starts with what are the common objectives? What are you inherently trying to accomplish? And the nice thing about account-based, well, some people call it account-based everything. It's really not just marketing.
Sure.
But by aligning on the ideal customer profile and then turning that ideal customer profile into specific lists of companies, and then turning that list of companies into contacts, and then mapping that decision journey, and based on the decision journey, overlaying the content and the offers and the next best actions throughout that journey. And you now have an aligning mechanism across marketing and sales that has everybody knowing what role they play. And then we typically will work with them to flowchart that out. How do you map the journey? What happens if they do this or they don't do that? And that creates then maybe a marketing action or a call from a BDR or whatever the next best action is. But by going through that whole process, scripting it out, codifying that model into the marketing technology stack so that it's kind of codified, it really creates glue that keeps everybody connected, and it does a really nice job of breaking down the silos.
And what are some of those benefits that you've seen whenever those silos do start to break down and once they're addressed?
Well, there's a variety of benefits. One is by having a common focus, and that everybody's going after the same targets, you're a lot more efficient with your spending because everything is aligning to the same audience, the same market segments, the same accounts. So you're not wasting money going after folks that really don't matter. So that I think is definitely a benefit. You see a lot more effectiveness by being able to orchestrate the kind of conversation you want to have to help a buyer go through their journey. and think about that not by functional silos, but about the whole journey. Now you're able to put together the content and the offers and the conversations that help them get to a positive buying decision a lot more effectively. So we're seeing the return on marketing investment going up, the close times going down. And the implication of that is then you're making more revenue and generally doing that more profitably. So the impact is pretty good all the way around.
Today's growth story is all about search engine marketing. The company we're highlighting is SentinelOne. This challenger cybersecurity brand was set out to disrupt the endpoint protection space. Their brand was top-notch, their product was innovative, but they were struggling to gain traction online in an already developed industry. Then they found Directive Consulting, a B2B search marketing agency. Within the first quarter of working with Directive, SentinelOne was able to increase their organic traffic by 128% and overall lead volume by an outstanding 251%. Now, I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
Absolutely. I know that you have a resource on this too. Maybe if you could tell our audience a little bit about, the ebook that you have available to kind of help unpack this in some greater detail.
Well, this approach that we've talked about, trying to break down silos and connect the dots on an ABM approach, is something that we've put some thought to, and we certainly like to be able to share any of that insights that we can to help people in their planning. ABM is kind of a new subject that I think is one of those that is getting a lot of buzz, but methodologies that I was using 30 years ago at Dell could have been called account-based marketing.
Right.
We just didn't have some of the technologies to execute it. Right. So I think there's some content that we've got there that's helpful. And then I also wrote an ebook a couple of years ago for the CMO Club on building a modern marketing organization. And the quest at the time was to find the ideal marketing structure for modern marketers. Well, no surprise, that was like the search for the Holy Grail. Since structure follows strategy and everybody's strategy is different, their structure are all different.
Sure.
But we did find some universal principles, and I alluded to that earlier. That if marketers can think about these 4 A's of organization design, they're going to be a lot better off. And those are, just to reiterate, acumen. What's the talent that you need in the organization? And if it's not through full-time employees, through partners, how do you build the acumen you need? How do you create the accountability so that people know what they need to get done and are able to accomplish it? How do you create the alignment, connecting the dots through processes and structural expectations? And then the fourth is agility. And how do you move at the speed of the modern world? The idea of annual planning that is set in stone that leads to buying your media all up front, it just doesn't work anymore. And so how do you create agility? But those 4 elements, there's a lot of tension between them. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. If I'm a specialist and I'm focused on my thing, then how do I move quickly, but do that in a way that keeps everybody else up to date? Well, that alignment energy takes time. It takes process, and that often takes away from sometimes the agility that you want to have. If you're moving quickly, how do you keep everybody up to date? So there's inherent tension in those 4 A's, which is the art of management.
I love it. So, John, this has been a great conversation. I love your perspective on how to bust these organization silos and improve demand generation. If anybody has any follow-up questions or would like to connect with you or Springbox, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, Springbox.com. That's Springbox.com. And there are information on there about some of our content, about how to reach us, how to reach me. I'm also available on LinkedIn and Twitter. And I often call myself a 62-year-old millennial. Having to stay current in the digital age, I can communicate and contact and respond to people's interests through a variety of different ways.
I love that. Well, John, thanks again for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big 3, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.